So something I want to talk about is one of the main reasons I hate the Clone Wars. As stated in my community tab, I've been reading some Star Wars Republic, and it kicks ass. It completely blows the Clone Wars series out of the water, and it makes me embarrassed how much Filoni struggled to keep up, if at all. Star Wars Republic makes Filoni's crap look like a preschool program. Star Wars Republic is like the hardcore experience we deserve from Star Wars. And TCW is the shitty kitty baby show that they play over at Weenie Hut Juniors. There's really no comparison, and I'm embarrassed to live on the same planet as people like Nostalgia Critic and Cosmonaut Variety Hour, who tout TCW out as an intricate, hardcore experience that brings the prequel trilogy to quality standards or whatever. Now, my thoughts on Star Wars Republic will come at a later date, but I wanted to bring it up, as it's good for comparison. The thing is, TCW is something that doesn't really appeal to prequel fans, and that's because TCW does not build upon the source material, it changes it. Oh sure, there's plenty of prequel fans who like the Clone Wars as it exists, and some of them might even dislike the parts of the show that blatantly contradict the prequels, but they'll still defend the overall show at the end of the day. But you know who else defends this show and has the opposite mentality on the prequels? You'll see that so many prequel haters, being the filthy casuals they are, watch the Clone Wars and nothing else, and it's probably a miracle that they even watch the micro-series if we're being real, and praise the shit out of it, and claim it's some of the best Star Wars content. TCW is nowhere close. Prequel haters seem to think that because the Clone Wars is easily accessible. I mean, when the Clone Wars was on Netflix, anyone could watch it pretty much, and a lot of people did. And based on a lack of experience with the overall Star Wars franchise beyond the movies, they convinced themselves that the Clone Wars is peak Star Wars. Listen, I used to be in that camp myself. I used to think the Clone Wars was brilliant. But then I decided to look into the less accessible shit. I read the Thrawn trilogy, the Darth Bane trilogy, Tales of the Jedi, Dark Empire, and I started to realize that the Clone Wars is nowhere close to peak Star Wars. And it also made me notice holes in the series itself. I was a fan of the prequel trilogy since I was first properly introduced to Star Wars when I was like 8, and I started to see all the problems TCW had. For one, Dave Filoni was incredibly loose with continuity, and even pretending that the expanded universe doesn't exist for a minute, there's numerous continuity errors with the films, and things that don't make sense. For example, they gave Obi-Wan and General Grievous a rivalry that never existed, because it's clear General Grievous and Obi-Wan never met before Revenge of the Sith. But since it wasn't outright said that they never met, they decided to wriggle in a made-up rivalry, when there's plenty of other characters that aren't Dooku and Grievous to work with. They could have used Asajj Ventress or Dirge, or even made up their own characters. I mean, we got Cad Bane, for example, in the series. We also got Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting Dooku numerous times, which heavily changes Revenge of the Sith, when it's clear they were talking about their first encounter on Geonosis. I know that Dooku as the head of the Separatists has to be a big part of the show, but you couldn't have someone else meet with Dooku instead? If you've seen my Clone Wars review series, I also complained about Yoda's vision about Order 66, in which Yoda proceeded to do nothing if this episode's supposed to be taken seriously. They also throw in inhibited ships for clone troopers, which retcon the much simpler explanation from Attack of the Clones, and so on and so forth. But further than that, I kind of feel like TCW was written with the mentality of pandering to prequel haters. I mean, this show's main run was from 2008 to 2012, correct? I suppose Filoni or George, whoever, were heavily influenced by people just shitting on the prequels, and it heavily affected their mindset making the show. It seems like they really just gave in to a lot of the criticisms, and it comes off on the final product. I mean, think about it. Why didn't they get Matt Lucas to reprise his role as Anakin after the micro-series? why Matt Lanter, who sounds nothing like Hayden Christensen? It's because the showrunners probably got sick of the whiny Anakin complaints that had been going on for years, and they decided to just change the character completely, and hope that would get people to shut up. However, this was an arse-backwards mentality to have, because now prequel haters are just using that to assist their arguments about the prequels, being like, see, this is exactly what Anakin Skywalker should have been like. What an improvement over the horribleness of the prequels. And you're not doing the movies themselves any favors. Doing shit like this also convinces people that the prequels as they exist are impossible to do justice, because they're just so poorly written. Like when they brought Darth Maul back after so many complaints, that did not help things. Maul was not designed as a deep, complex character, but they lazily wrote him back in, and people just cheered, regardless of how poorly written it actually was. Like seriously, TCW just lost track of the movies they were supposed to be tying into. TCW could have just picked up on what the prequels had already set up. For example, instead of the dumbass inhibited ships, you could have put some more emphasis on, the clones are genetically programmed to follow orders without question, and then add some more details, but still based on what was in the movies, because with inhibited ships, it seems like they just gave up, and decided to go along with prequel haters, and pretend that the non-existent plot hole existed, when they absolutely should have known better. TCW does that a lot, and they just break the universe in the process. Furthermore, it just seems like they're actively just trying to fix what ain't broken, instead of celebrating the prequels as they exist. The mentality TCW has given people, however, is just wrong. Look at the Clone Wars micro-series, the show that preceded Filoni's shit, and that series actually builded upon what was in the movies as they existed. Anakin Skywalker is actually portrayed accurately to what he was in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and they preserve his rocky relationship with Obi-Wan. And the thing is, nobody I've seen complains about this. Oh sure, they complained about it in the movies, and they'll go on and on about how it's nothing like Obi-Wan's description in A New Hope, without giving it some critical thought, as if people never argue with their friends ever. The argumentative banter between Anakin and Obi-Wan is not, I fucking hate you, and keep in mind that Anakin's in a stressful situation, because he's in the general vicinity of a woman he fantasized over for a decade, and also, that entire chase sequence, they're clearly being sarcastic with each other. Context. Point is that the micro-series, and what I've read of Star Wars Republic, has those moments of Anakin not listening to Obi-Wan and getting in trouble. But it doesn't detract from the story in play. It doesn't make me go like, wow, this is so poorly written and inaccurate to what Obi-Wan described in A New Hope, even though he lies to Luke in that very same scene about his father being dead and whatnot. The story so far has Anakin and Obi-Wan in the middle of a bloody war, and in the arc I'm describing, a bunch of the Jedi they're sent down with die horribly at the hands of Ventress and Dirge and whatnot. I mean, good luck convincing a prequel hater to actually sit down and read Star Wars Republic. I think the only reason they watched the Clone Wars to begin with was how it was described to them as a fix of the prequels, and not an enhancement. I mean, think about it. No one would use the word fix to describe the micro-series or the rest of the Clone Wars multimedia project, but the word fix is commonly used to describe TCW. The multimedia project is far more unbiased towards the movies, and actually builds upon what's there, while TCW has this mentality of walking back on the movies, changing aspects of them, and acting like they're listening to feedback. It gives people the impression that they're pulling a No Man's Sky on the prequels, except the prequels are not video games. I really hate content in general that has this mentality. The sequel trilogy is exactly that. Instead of just building on George Lucas's saga, they instead look at this stuff that wasn't received as well and go, oh no, this stuff has a portion of the fanbase who despises it. We'll have to change it. And that, in my opinion, just seems really spineless. It just tells me that you aren't confident in the story we already have, and that by changing it, you'll make it even worse. That's why J.J. Abrams was a horrible choice for Episode 7. You should have just gotten someone who is either completely unbiased or already likes all the Star Wars movies. Is that so hard? I think it comes down to the fact that TCW onwards has a lack of confidence in previous Star Wars stuff. Thus, it goes out of its way to change things, pander to those critical of the movies, and in turn just makes the whole thing a mess. That's what the Clone Wars did. It looked at the source material and instead of adapting it, changed it because it's the age of peak prequel hate, and you just assume your show will tank automatically if certain people aren't appeased. And that's just a bad mentality to have. And it's not even like when TCW was being made that it had to meet the financial quotas of Disney. As I hear, TCW wasn't even profitable in the early seasons. But George Lucas was happy to keep investing in it, because he wasn't the kind of guy who just gives up on something because he's not making money right off the bat. So hopefully I've given some context on why I hate the Clone Wars so much. I saw the prequels first, and so I'm obviously going to be more attached to them than a show that butchers and misrepresents them. I guess it can be argued that they didn't completely shit on the prequels, but what TCW did is far from satisfactory if you want to call it complimentary material. With that being said, however, I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
Under the mountain, a golden fountain. Were you praying that the law is strong?